Hello and welcome to the podcast According to Sci-Faith, where we discuss topics revolving around the compatibility of science and faith. I'm Joshua Göcking and you're listening to According to Sci-Faith. Episode 29, Game Theory. So in this episode I want to talk about a topic that is you rather seen not in the natural sciences, although it also occurs there, especially in biology and more than that in evolutionary biology, but it's most present in today's science, or in today's age we see it most often happening in economics. And therefore this topic, when I was studying it, the lecture where I studied this was actually an economics lecture where we learned about this. And this area of research, or this field of research, is called game theory. So before we start getting into it, it's a really interesting topic, and I really enjoyed it very much to learn about these things. And before we start with learning what is game theory, what is this all about, I think we need to understand what is meant by games in this context. And when you would refer to a game, usually you would think of basically games like cardboard games, or so board games or card games, or even games like football and so on. But mostly you would not think of real life situations. It would be something simulated, something where you play something. And this can also be covered by game theory. So the decisions you make in those games can also be interesting research for game theorists. But it is the term game that is used in game theory is much broader. Basically, it covers every kind of decision making that is needed for reasonable human beings. So, if the assumption is always that a rationally thinking human, how he would decide in certain situations, and then you can look at a simulation. What is the outcome of the simulation, depending on the decision of others. And this is a really interesting topic. Because every day in your everyday life, you are confronted with such situations where you need to decide which course of action you choose, and also in many times the course of action you choose is not only dependent on what you do, or the result of the course of action you choose is not always dependent on what you do, but what others are doing as well. And we will see this in a bit. So just to remember, it's not, when we are talking about game theory, it's not just about how to win the games that I play with my friends, or the online games or whatever. So it's really about real life decisions that come also into play in there. And as we will see later, also very important in politics and in foreign policy, how nations interact with each other, which strategies do they take, and so on. So it's a really important topic, has really many applications. And so let's dive in. And what I want to start with to illustrate this, and instead of giving you the abstract theory, I just give you an illustration of which is used often. There are examples that are easy to understand and which basically cover most of the concepts of game theory, most of the issues where you have there, and the results you can achieve from there. And the thing that is again and again used in there is the so-called prisoner's dilemma. And what is this all about? So let's say we have two criminals, and they committed a crime, and the police caught them. But they have not enough evidence to get them into jail right away. And so they try to get a confession out of them. To do this, they interrogate them separately and give them the decision to basically to talk, to confess, or to be silent, to not say anything. And both criminals basically know that if they both remain silent, then they will both go to jail for 2 years, because police has a little bit of evidence, and this is enough to get them into jail for 2 years. But if one of them is confessing and the other one remains silent, then the one who remained silent will get the full jail time, which was 10 years. And the one who was confessing, he will get free immediately because he showed that he was the one who was confessing and so on, and so he will get this kind of deal. And if both are confessing, then they will both get 5 years of jail. So in this case, you now are confronted with how to make the best decision for yourselves. And it turns out that in basically all cases, they would decide to both confess, because this is the only stable solution. Because if you stay silent, if you say, okay, I will stay silent and I hope that the other one will also remain silent, then the problem is that if he does not, you will go to jail for 10 years. So this is the worst outcome for you. And if you remain silent and the other one too, then it's a better outcome, but then you will go to jail for 2 years. And if you would have talked, if you would have confessed, then you would have gone free immediately. So in both cases, you are best off if you are talking, if you are confessing. No matter what the other one, what your partner in crime is doing, no matter what he's doing, you would be better off if you would just be confessing. And that's what is called a dominant strategy. A dominant strategy basically means that no matter how the other person involved will react, no matter what he or she will do, it will result in you getting the best outcome in this very situation. And the situation where both are confessing is then called so-called Nash equilibrium. And this is named after the mathematician John Nash. He was a mathematician who was working especially on this game theoretic things and theorems. And in his later life, he became schizophrenic, so he had to deal with this a lot. There's also a movie about him, A Beautiful Mind, it is called. And after him, this is named. And this Nash equilibrium is basically what one would expect to happen if everyone is acting rationally. Because if everyone is acting naturally in this case, then one would say, okay, we are both confessing, and so, or each individually says, I will confess, and so I have to go after the dominant strategy, and therefore both are confessing and will both yield 5 years of jail. Now, as you can see, this is a lot worse than if both would have remained silent. Then they would have, if you put it together, if you consider them collectively, then they would both have, as a collective have had a better result. And that's the dilemma part. That's the part that is kind of bad, as you might think about it. But it is you have to understand that this is not a stable solution, because everyone who would, if one would have remained silent, then you would also always have to have in mind that the other one could possibly be confessing, and then you would go to jail for 10 years, and this would be really bad for you. So everyone decides, okay, even if the other one is confessing too, 5 years are a lot better than 10 years, so I will decide to do this one. And therefore, a solution which is actually not the best one for them as a collective is the only one that has an equilibrium that is basically can turn out, because they would be it would be in their best rational decision individually to decide this way. So this is the interesting part about this. And such games that I described before, where the action of one will the profit of one will result in a negative profit of the other, as it is usually the case in such games. Such games are called zero-sum games. So you might have heard this term several times, especially in discussions about economics and so on, that about zero-sum games and so on. And that's exactly what is meant by this, that there's no win-win situation basically, but there's only a situation where the profit of one person immediately negatively affects the other person. This is basically called, because zero-sum game, so the sum is basically zero. And so if one gets a profit, something positive, the other one gets something negative, a loss. So in the end, it remains all zero. And this is really interesting and shows how this whole making decision works. And you can create many of such games, and you can try to figure out what is the Nash equilibrium. Is there a dominant strategy? Is there a Nash equilibrium? So because it turns out not always, not in every game there are Nash equilibria. In some games there are more than one Nash equilibrium, and also not every game has a dominant strategy. And so this makes things a lot more difficult sometimes. And what I also think is an example where you see this really interestingly is something from I think it's a British game show. And in the end of this game show, so in the beginning there are two people who play together, and they earn prize money and in certain games, and in the end they have a certain amount of the prize money, and then the last game decides basically what is done with this money that they earned by now. And this last game is called Golden Balls. So if you want to watch those videos or watch what this is all about, you can just type it in YouTube. There should be plenty of videos on this where different outcomes were shown. And it is basically built such that they can both decide whether they want to split the prize money or whether they want to steal it. So splitting would mean that both get 50% of the money, and stealing would mean that there it depends. If one person says I want to split the money and the other one says I want to steal the money, then the person who wants to steal the money will get all of it. However, if both persons decide that they want to steal it, then nobody will get the money. Then it will be all lost. And the funny thing about this is, if you game theoretically compute it through and look where are the Nash equilibria and so on, then you will see that the point where both are splitting is actually not a Nash equilibrium. This will not happen or should not happen. So what can happen is that both are stealing. This is the most likely version most times, or that one is splitting and the other one is stealing. Because you actually, if you say I want to split, or if you expect the other to steal, then it's not really a benefit for you to steal too. And if you then split, you don't gain something, you don't lose something. So this is also a Nash equilibrium. But the only thing that's not a Nash equilibrium is the one where both are splitting the pot. And if you watch the videos, because the funny thing about this is before they make the decision, they can basically talk to each other and assure themselves that they surely will split and that they will split because they are good people and so on and so on. And most of the times it turns out that one person was lying and did actually steal, or both were lying and were both stealing. So it's pretty nasty to some degree. But what's really interesting is because one person really gamed this game basically, and what he did is in this discussion where they before can talk about what they will do and how they want to engage this game, then he basically said, okay, we can I will choose steal, and we can split them money right afterwards. So after the show, you come to me and I will give you 50%. But now I will steal. I will take everything, and then afterwards we can split it. But for this, you need to choose split, because if you choose steal, then it will all be lost. So please choose split, and I will steal, and then afterwards we split it up fairly. And the other one was of course arguing, hey, why are you doing this? Why not immediately split and be done with it, and then it's all nice and well? But he said, no, I will do it like this. I will steal and you can do what you want, but I urge you to split it, because then we can split it after the show. And then this other guy decided to go along and split it. And the funny thing was, the one who said he would steal also decided to split it. So they had this result, which was basically impossible because it's not a Nash equilibrium, and they achieved it by him changing a game a little bit, because what he did is he said, I will steal anyway. So you can decide whether I get all of it and possibly afterwards split it with you, which you are not assured of course, or whether you steal it and we all get nothing, and you all also don't have the prospect of later getting something. So in his mind it was, okay, if I steal it, I will for sure get nothing. But if I split, then I maybe get something. And so for him, this was basically a new dominant strategy to split it, because there might be something that he get if he can trust this person to split it with him later. So he decided to split, and the other one, knowing basically that he would go this way because this was the best solution for him, split too. And so they had this new equilibrium. And I thought this was really interesting. This shows pretty much really in a really good way how game theory works. And so I encourage you to watch this. I think if you type in Golden Balls game show and so on, I think this probably will be the first video that pops up. So this is how basically the concept of game theory. And this is also not only in economics the case, although you might understand that there it is most present, because economy is mostly about individuals making decisions, and but it's also the case in natural sciences, but of course most present in natural science where decisions need to be made. So in this natural science of living things, meaning biology, and there it is especially important in evolutionary theory and or in the theory of evolution. And there, for example, one believes that the peacock, you know, peacocks, they have pretty beautiful feathers and so on, and this they use also in trying to get a partner. So the males try this to get a partner, and so they compete with their feathers for the best partner. And one thinks that this is also game theoretic to knock out the other partner and so on. So there's a lot of game theory theoretic discussions involved there, and also in many other areas in behavior between animals. There are certain situations where animal can benefit from helping each other, but also it would be an sacrifice for them to do so. And there's also game theoretic decisions if whether you help them or whether you let the other one help you and then betray them and so on. So there's a lot of this also involved in the natural sciences. As I already told you in the last episodes, I would like to give you short insights into my book, Alien Thoughts, my new novel that is out now. It's available on Amazon. So I would like to give you a short excerpt of it that you can kind of see what the story is all about, what's the content, what is it, and if this is something you might be interested in. All right, let's start. All participants rose respectfully as Boris entered the room. "Be seated," Boris ordered, and sat down as well. "Hank is still busy, but will be here shortly to brief us on this situation." "Ah, here he is already." Hank entered the room. You could tell by the look on his face that he had been working without taking a break for the past few hours. His facial expression did not bode well. Patrizia had rarely seen him so tense. He was often very serious, but usually calm and relaxed. But not since she had alerted him to her discovery this morning. "I think it's best if Hank starts reporting on the state of affairs right away." Boris continued, giving Hank the signal to begin. "All right," Hank replied, pausing briefly, during which he connected his neurochip to the computer in the conference room. This allowed him to project from his chip to the screen. "This morning, Patrizia and I came across him when we were checking the logs of the refugees. Theodore Freeman. His new neurochip has the expected properties, but the neurochip he had implanted during his time in the rebel areas showed a period of time where the chip was nearly inactive and the fugitive was not subject to mind control. Patricia was confused. Normally she would not interrupt a meeting like this, but she finally wanted to know what it all meant. She blurted out, "Wait a minute, the people in the rebel areas don't have neurochips implanted in them, don't they? That's why we don't have them under mind control, right?" There was a silence for a moment. Hank didn't know how to continue and he looked inquiring at Boris. Boris nodded. "You can go ahead and fill her in. That's why she's here." If this excerpt caught your interest, I encourage you to get my book, Alien Thoughts, and to just read on what happened before, what will happen after this, and then I really would enjoy it if you could give me a review of what you've thought about the book. If you have already ordered it and read it, then I really would enjoy your feedback as well. So for this, you can either write a review on Amazon, which would be great because this always helps people to other people who might be interested in this book to understand if this book is something for them and get feedback. But also you can write to me at my contact formula at my website sci-faith.de/en/contact. There you can contact me and write me what you think about the book and the feedback you have for me. Thank you. I really appreciate your support. And now let's continue with the podcast. So the games we discussed now were basically games where you make one decision and then it's over. So you can decide in the Golden Balls example, do you split or steal, and afterwards it's over. After the show, the people usually they did not know each other, so usually they don't ever meet again. Maybe sometimes on the street, but they don't meet in their circles, social circles. So if you would have been stealing and got away with all the money and betrayed this guy with whom you played, you would never, basically, most likely never see him again. So you wouldn't care if he comes after you or if he holds a grudge or something like that. But the question is, what is if this is not the case? What if you have repeating games? What if you have this game repeatedly every day with the same partner? For example, you have to make the same assumption. Of course, you can then understand that the reaction in the next game of the one who you are playing with will depend on what you did before. He will, if you always betray him, he will at some degree don't trust you anymore and say, okay, not like that. And there to understand this, one needs to go further and develop different game types, different strategies of playing repeated games. And this was, for example, also important during the Cold War. There, the Americans started with an institute, and they looked into the different types of games you can play or types of strategies that you can use and try to find out what would be the most effective strategy. And there's, for example, you could basically just imagine some strategies you could use. Basically, let's say we play Golden Balls again and again and again. And you could say basically, okay, as long as the other one splits with me, then I will also split with him. But if he betrays me, then I will also betray him, and then I will not trust him anymore. I will betray him until the end, if there is an end. So this could be one strategy. One strategy could be, I will betray from the beginning and look how he reacts, or I will play along, I will split with him for some time and then I will betray him and look how he reacts and betray him in a repeated cycle or something like that. Or there are different strategies. One strategy would be to say, okay, I will act like he does. Basically, I will play along, I will split with him, and if he decides to steal, then in the next game I will steal too. If he then continues to steal, I will also continue to steal. If he says, okay, let's split, then in the next game I will again split, and so on. So you can try different types of games. And the last one I described, where you basically always react to what the other one did before and do the same, this is called tit for tat, because that's basically what it is. You do tit for tat. And this is, as they could show, in certain circumstances, this is the most effective strategy, that you always do tit for tat, that you will always say, okay, I will exactly do what you do after you did it, so I will always react in this way. And because this strategy is, of course, it's nice, because you start by trusting the other person. It's also forgiving, so you don't hold a grudge. So if he once betrayed you, you will betray him also once, or you will also retaliate. That's the second part. It's retaliatory. But after you retaliated, you will forgive. You will say, okay, now it's fine, and we can trust each other again. And it's also clear. Your proponent knows clearly what you are doing. He knows clearly, okay, he betrayed me now because I betrayed him. But if I start to go on trust again, then he will also trust me again. And this is really effective in certain scenarios. If the ones you are surrounded with, the players you are playing with, are all bullies, are all people who permanently try to betray you, then this, of course, is not really effective. But if you have, and this they could also show, if you have like a small bubble of people who play tit for tat and who are nice to each other and therefore help each other out, and are only surrounded with bullies who only want to betray you, then in the long run, those will come through, and the tit for tat players will, if you assume some mechanism by which they can expand, then they will expand further than the bullies, and will in the end be victorious. So if you consider this, and this has also often been considered to also be responsible for the coming into existence of, for the generation of social norms, of moral codes, and so on. And in a sense, that is the case. In some sense, you can consider it like this. You can consider it like a form of karma or something like this. But this only, of course, works if you really know that there are consequences. So some researchers found that it basically would only work if these social norms that you then postulate, that not only a large number of the society is committed to hold to these social norms, but also that they expect from a large number of the society that they will hold to it. Then you can expect something like this to occur. However, it's only as long as there are consequences. So this needs also to be the case, that there are consequences for these decisions, or consequences for people who defect, consequences for people who betray the trust of the others. And only as long as this is certain, as long as it is certain that there are no consequences, this will work out. And also, if you have a situation where there is no game after that, basically, then you will cannot have this hold up. So when they tried these different strategies, of course, in the last point of the game, so they had a finite number of games, and in the last point of the game, of course, they were always betraying, because why shouldn't you? Because you know that the other one cannot react to what you are doing. And this is a problem in this game. So they try to work around it by not letting them know how many games they were playing. But still, if you have a certainty that there won't be consequences, then you can always defect. And in this reasoning, you then always will be defect. And also you could have cases where certain players are not affected by your decision, where you can isolate your decisions from them, and then you can betray them as you like, and basically without any consequences. And this in society, you can see this maybe as the social weak persons, or the minorities, or people who can easily be exploited, and this could also occur there. So as you can see clearly, there is no way in which this morality that we observe today could only have come about by such game theoretic decisions or game theoretic emergences. To some degree maybe, but not to all degrees, because there are many games, if you would like it, maybe many decisions with which would not make game theoretic sense, where this cooperation would not even make sense. So especially also in religions, you have this, that there are decisions people make that you could not explain with such a game theoretic approach. For example, in Christianity, there are many, especially of the first Christians, but also many of the persecuted Christians today chose or were martyred. So, for example, in the Roman Empire, it was often demanded of Christians to abdicate their faith or meet their fate, basically, to meet martyrdom, and that's oftentimes what they chose. So why would they do this? How would this make sense if this moral codes are just game theoretic assumptions that were brought up? No, there has to have been a faith that this is the greater thing to do, the right thing to do, and a faith in doing the right thing, even if it leads to a result that is not leading to any profit for them. So this shows clearly that this cannot be the full explanation, and it's also, I think, luckily it shows that this cannot be the full explanation, because if you think of it, if this would be the sole reason why we act morally, then this would basically be not moral at all, because we would only act this way because something we do, some egoistical thing we do, could hunt us down later in the future. So if I betray a person, then I only abstain from doing this because in a later time he could take a revenge on me or something like this. So it in some areas, or for some people this might be the case, but I think if this would not be moral, this would be basically acting out of fear of punishment, and this is not what one would call morality. And one might argue that especially in religions, some people act like this in fear of God, but actually if you look into what the faith teaches us, that's not what a Christian faith teaches, that we should be afraid of God and only act morally because we are afraid of punishment or something like that. No, actually Christianity teaches something completely different, and that by the work of Jesus Christ at the cross, that we are saved, that we have become new creations, and that this egoistical nature that this game theory shows that is there and that leads to these decisions, that this has been saved, has been redempted, and that we can live free from that, and then we can live in love, in the love that he gives us, and therefore make decisions that are not selfish, that are not egoistical, that are not just moved motivated by their own profit that one can gain, but only consider others, and also, as the Bible says, to consider our neighbor higher than ourselves, and so on. So this is a completely game changer, basically, if you want to say it like this. So and therefore this shows that I think moral cannot come from something like this. Some kind of moral, some kind of norms can come this way, but I would argue that those are not really good ones, because the motivation behind it is not rooted in doing good, in doing right, but it is rooted in being afraid of the consequences that might occur if I would do wrong. And even these consequences can also occur if you would do the right thing. The right thing can also lead to bad consequences for you personally. So this would not lead to moral decisions at all. It would be rather that is kind of a coincidence, would be kind of a coincidence that it would lead to, mostly to moral actions. But actually, real moral actions, real doing good and doing right, cannot come from such things, cannot come from such game theoretic considerations. So game theory might be great to describe the behavior among animals, or in some societies or some areas where there is not a high moral code and where this emerges this way. But I think to really describe how morals come about, how it comes that we act morally, I think that's a much more spiritual question. And of course, if you only think that the materialistic way is the only thing there is, then of course you're stuck with trying to describe it in some way, and then game theory is basically the only thing to do it. But I think this shows that the materialistic world cannot be everything, because it cannot describe this thoroughly, and it needs a spiritual description of this, which can be found in religion. And I think in the Christian faith offers the best template for how we can really act morally, and in a way where we really do good out of a good nature, and not out of being afraid of the consequences of doing something wrong. So that's everything for today's episode. I hope you liked it and you enjoyed each part of it. If you want to get in touch with me or discuss a topic or want to give me some feedback, then feel free to contact me using the contact form on my website, sci-faith.de/en. And there you can go to the contact tab and contact me. And if you have any other things or episodes you want to have covered there, or topics you want to have covered, feel free to contact me there. Also, if you are not yet familiar with the format in which this podcast is produced, let me just briefly explain it to you. So there always at the beginning of a month or of a block, there is a big block of 4 episodes in one thing. It's kind of like a preview, which I call it, where you have the next 4 episodes all in one episode together, combined. And this is for people who like to hear long format podcasts, who have a long way to work or something else, where they can listen to a long episode and can then have a preview of the next 4 episodes all at once, and are completely up to date from the beginning of the block. For those who like their episodes shorter, who prefer it if they have a half an hour or even less of a podcast episode, for those there is every week afterwards will appear a podcast episode almost in that length, and this way I can publish every week a new podcast every episode, and everyone can have it his own way, either once a month a long chunk of content, or once a week a shorter format podcast episode. So I think that's the best way for everyone, and also for me when I'm producing it. Please also note that this is an independent podcast, which means that it is recorded, produced, and marketed by me. So I really need your support in this. So if you like this podcast, then give it a 5-star rating. And if you have the time, even write a review to it. This just helps other listeners to become aware of this podcast, and then people who might be interested in this content can become aware of it. Also, if you have friends who you think would like this content, then recommend it to them and share it with them. Also, you can support me in other ways, for example by reading my blog and subscribing to my newsletter, or even by reading my books, which you can find on Amazon. For example, there is my latest novel out now is Alien Thoughts, which is pretty entertaining from the feedback that I gotten, and so it's also in some way related to science and faith. The topic of it is also in there, but of course you can also read the book to this podcast, Sci-Faith, The Compatibility of Science and Faith, which is also available in English since last year. Thank you for that, and now I wish you a wonderful day, and I'm looking forward for you to tune in again next time.